Did you hear that? The whole Judean region, the whole city of Jerusalem, are flowing out to receive a baptism of forgiveness. Our gospel begins with a river of grace. You're forgiven. No matter what you've done, no matter who you are, it's just grace. You're forgiven. And the gospel goes on then to keep pouring forth total grace. You don't have to deserve it. You don't have to achieve anything or do anything. You're forgiven. The gospel presents this profligate, overflowing grace to each one of us, but then I think we get a little stingy ourselves. Are you offering much grace to those around you? Oh, I think nowadays we're pretty judgy and critical of those around us. We kind of hold on to things. Are you offering much grace? It almost seems like social media is training us to be judgy, snarky, critical. You don't see a lot of grace on social media. If someone says something that's a little sideways or not politically correct, or maybe they have politics different than yours, or if you see a mistake, do you see the way people pounce on social media? It's kind of ravenous, actually. It's training us not to offer much grace. Watch out for what we're being trained in. So right now, think about this. Are you giving much grace? I know there's somebody you're ticked off at. Guaranteed. What about just let it go? Think about right now, I mean specifically, think in the people around you in your life. Maybe just give a little grace, because the gospel has already offered you total grace. You got plenty. Just give a little to others. It's one of the most vivid memories in my ministry. It's late in the year 2003. The Iraq War had been going on for a couple months. And I was in Washington, D.C. with a large group of clergy, and we were working the Hill trying to advocate for children's health issues. And we broke up in little teams of 3. And so I was sitting with my team, a Roman Catholic priest, a rabbi, and me, and we're sitting with a senator right off the Senate floor. And suddenly an aide came rushing in and said, "We have to clear the building. There's going to be a defense briefing." So during the war, if there was a defense briefing, they would clear the whole Senate building. And so the aide said, "You guys head down this back stairwell and get out of the building." So the rabbi, the priest, and the minister, I know this sounds like a joke, we started heading down the back stairwell, when suddenly coming up the stairwell rounded a guy in a nice suit but with an earbud in and a big automatic weapon at his side. We obviously surprised him, and he said, "To the wall!" So the rabbi, the priest, and the minister are spread out against the wall. And then right behind that guy came Donald Rumsfeld. For those of you on the younger side, Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense, and he was coming to give the Senate a briefing. And he saw us all against the wall, And he rushed up to us, and he pulled the Catholic priest off the wall and gave him a hug and said, "I am so sorry this has happened. We thought the building was clear." And he said, "And will you please pray for me in these complex times?" And then he pulled the rabbi off the wall and hugged him and lavishly asked for his forgiveness, saying, "I can't believe this happened. I am so sorry." And then he pulled me off the wall and hugged me and continued to be so loving and forgiving. And he said, "I'm so sorry. My own security detail will now take you out of the building. Please, I apologize." So they got us out of the building. And so now the rabbi, the priest, and the minister, still sounds like a joke, doesn't it? We're standing outside the Senate building, and we're kind of shell-shocked, just standing there. And then the rabbi said, "You know, I disagree with everything Donald Rumsfeld says. I don't like his politics one bit. But I think I love him." And that sentence has just imprinted itself upon my memory. It's just grace. But I think I love him. Could we offer some grace these days? Maybe someone's ticking you off and you disagree with everything they say. But I love them. I'm beginning a sermon series called Prepare Ye the Way. And it's based on these opening words of the Gospel of Mark. And both Juan Carlos and I, over these next 4 weeks, will be exploring specific ways we can prepare our hearts for the arrival of Christ. Now, certainly one good way would be to offer grace. You've received complete grace, to offer it to others. But I want to focus in this first part of the sermon series on being calm. I believe that when we are calm, we're put in touch with our best selves. And so to prepare the way for the arrival of the Christ, can we become a bit more calm? Connected to the soul within you, centered. You see, I believe that there is a special concoction of anxiety at play in our time. Now, people have been anxious through all times and all epochs, but I believe there is like a special cocktail of things to be anxious about these days. I mean, there's horrible wars underway, and we hear such terrible things, and you can worry everything's going to spin out and all these geopolitical strategies, and it could all come off the rails, and we're facing environmental catastrophe, and who knows what's going to happen. It could just spin out of control, and the economy, you never know about the economy, but it all seems so nervous-making. It's like this concoction of anxiety, and we don't know how to navigate our lives in this complex world, so what's the good life you're supposed to be leading, and how to be wholesome and also achieving and are you doing okay? And all this anxiety, it's like a big anxiety snowball. But to prepare our hearts, if we could become just a little more calm. You're put in touch with your best self when you're calm. I don't mean some huge discipline of meditation or prayer even. I just mean you have access to a reservoir within you to make sure you take hold of some of that calm. Everything goes better when we're calmer. But it's almost like our society is training us not to be calm. It's all frenetic, kinetic, and anxious. I went to a movie the other day. I was going to see what would be a calm and lovely movie. That's why I was going. But you know, when you go to a movie, all of a sudden those previews come on. And they're way louder than the movie. And it's all like action, killing and beating and shooting. And I'd gone there to be calm. And it's just like this cacophony of violence. And It's like society is always trying to get you ramped up. Like even at home, if you're watching television and you've got it on a nice volume and it's something calm, when suddenly a commercial comes on, have you noticed that? The volume's louder, and all of a sudden it's all just manic stuff. Can we be more calm? Society's training you in the opposite. Like even when you're texting, do you know when you're texting someone, you have to put exclamation points on it to show you're happy? That's kind of how it works now, because you can't read emotions when you're texting someone. So to be polite and calm, you put exclamation points. But then you start reading these texts with all these exclamation points, and it all seems so ramped up, and it seems like it's kind of... Can you be more calm? Everything is better when we're calm. In the holidays, our whole society just ramps it up. It's all about energy and almost a type of holiday mania. Could we be more calm? Even religion. You know, religion usually is trying to amp you up. I mean, even here at First-Plymouth, we do big music and we try to get some positive energy flowing, and I love it. And lots of church services, you walk in, there's like rock bands cranking, and everybody's, and you know, religion tries to hype you up, it seems, but religion might do better to calm you down. When I was a boy and my dad would be preaching, I would sit in the back pew and I would lie down when he was preaching, and I would fall asleep. And I would occasionally wake up and hear his voice, and it was all so peaceful and calm. Probably the best thing I could offer you right now is a really boring sermon where you just sort of put your head on the shoulder of the person next to you, kind of fade out a little bit. I think when we're calm, we're put in touch with our spiritual life power. But when you're anxious, you're put in touch with your sensate life power. Let me explain. I'm quoting one of the great philosophers of the 20th century, Edith Stein. And she had this notion that you have a sensate life power. You're in a body, and that body has desires and things that makes it happy. And so you're constantly, with sensate life power, you're trying to acquire the things that make you happy and fulfilled. And also the sensate life power is if you're anxious, you want to protect yourself and protect your body and such. And then she talked about a spiritual life power. And I believe if we're calmer, you're put in touch with the spiritual life power, which is based on our loving relationships, our values, our deepest self. Do you know much about Edith Stein? She is perhaps the most interesting person of the 20th century. Do you know about her? She was born in 1892 into a Jewish family in Germany. Now that should be halting when you hear me say that. What might happen to her when she's in her late 40s if you're born a Jew in Germany? It was apparent right after she was born that she had a capacious mind, a spacious intellect. And she proceeded quickly through the academic ranks. She was a genius. She got her PhD in philosophy with some of the top German philosophers, and then right when she received her PhD, she hit the glass ceiling. 1916, a woman with a PhD, she couldn't find a post. We still don't have this down yet. There's still a glass ceiling, but imagine 1916. She couldn't receive a professor position, so she was now the teaching assistant. Even though she was her own philosophical mind of great genius, she was a teaching assistant to Husserl, one of the great German philosophers. And she began to advocate for women's rights. She hit that glass ceiling, so she began to teach and talk about equality in education, equality in life for women. And at this point, She was an atheist. Now, to say she was a German philosopher in the early 20th century who was an atheist is to be completely redundant. They all were, okay? So she doesn't believe in God at all. She's doing important philosophical work. And then one time on a break, she just began to read the autobiography of a Roman Catholic saint, Saint Teresa of Avila. It's from the 1500s, and it talks about through a deep calm and peace that Teresa had achieved a mystical connection to God. And as this great German philosopher, Edith Stein, read this, she began to feel it. And she came to faith. And she decided to become a Roman Catholic nun and entered the Carmelite monastery and devoted her life to this deep, calm, and mystical connection to God. She continued to write philosophy, but now it was about this connection to soul and a higher power. And then it was in 1942 that the Roman Catholic Church had issued a decree that the Nazis didn't like. And in retaliation, the Gestapo came into these Roman Catholic communities and grabbed anyone of Jewish lineage. They grabbed Edith Stein, sent her to Auschwitz. The first day she arrived there, they executed her. And then in 1998, this is unbelievable. In 1998, she was canonized as a saint of the Roman Catholic Church. Now, this is complex, and we should watch for any anti-Semitism in our world always. And she was killed because of her Jewish lineage, but she was sainted because of her Catholic faith. It's complex. Life is complex, but focus on the core of this story. I believe when we're calm, we're connected to what she called that spiritual life power. We're focused on what matters most when we're calm. We're most connected to our loved ones around us. We can become bearers of grace to those around us the more that we are calm. When we're anxious, we're thrown into that sensate life power. Everything becomes about protection and fear and making sure I get what I need. So I say to you now at the beginning of Advent, be calm. This will ready our hearts for the Christ. Be calm. Come, Christ Jesus. Amen.